Oh yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I
The
love the
whole
music.
thing. Yep. Cool. That was actually written by a friend of ours called Ian. He's a
Mm.
lovely guy.
He was on the episode, right? I started listening from
Yes.
the very
Yes. Yeah,
early
he did.
stages. I was going to say, going forth is a lot like I can't remember the guest you had on there, but he did do a very fourth wall breaking story where the character realizes he's in the story.
Yeah. I can't remember which one
Must
that
have been
was.
back to episode
Yeah,
6.
it's
It's the other kind of cross pitch for it. Because I remember you mentioned it then. It's Stranger Than Fiction, and I remember Ben, you mentioned the film.
Yes.
I think it was
Strange Than Fiction. Yes. Yes. No, it's ringing a bell for me. Unfortunately, we've done 200 episodes or so, and I feel like there's a hole in my brain, and things are just falling out of it. So,
yeah, I feel like that, and I don't run a podcast, so you're fine.
the same hole as me, Ben. When
Yeah.
you said, like, I can remember what you wrote for most prompts, but not what I wrote.
Yeah, it's the same bullet. Whoever shot me, it went through my head and into your head. There's been a bit of backsplatter back and forth as well, I think, as well.
We just have a bunch of weird canon elements like Piggy Wiggy Woo and the Prime Minister. They just exist forever.
For those of us,
Have you been watching the Blackadder
those
Christmas special? Is that
yeah,
Piggy Wiggy Woo?
is that where that comes from? Was it a Blackadder?
Yes.
Was it
Yeah,
something
I know that
with
because I watched the
Dawn?
Blackadder Christmas special over Christmas.
I haven't watched it for years. It must have
Oh.
been buried in my noggin.
So yeah, for those joining us in the middle of this this conversation, we've just discovered that Nico is a plagiarizing thief.
I can't edit this out. So, as you may have already heard, we are in the midst of what we can only describe as an interview, because otherwise the police have to get involved. G.J. Dunn, or as we call him, Gareth. Gareth, are you ready for questiones that don't involve me getting sent Dan for knocking off Blackadder?
I was born ready.
That must have been horrible for your parents. So, what is the first story you wrote which meant something to you?
Oh, well, I've got two answers to that question, really, because there's the first story I started writing that meant something to me, and the first story that I stopped writing that meant something to me. So I suppose the first story...
Like the first story that you stopped writing that meant something to you is actually a really interesting answer to that. So I'll earmark that one. Can we have that one?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. It's the first story that I finished writing that meant something to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I suppose the first story that I started writing that meant something to me, I was maybe 14. I was on an aeroplane going to Florida with my family. I had this brilliant idea. It was fantastic about people who could control the four elements. And it was the first time I'd tried anything to do with writing. There were four people around the world, and each one could control the elements. So one fire, one air, one water, and one earth. And I started writing on the plane to I think it was a family holiday to Florida. And I kept writing, and I found I quite enjoyed the writing. I wrote a good maybe 10,000 words of that novel, and then I arrived back home and found that Avatar: The Last Airbender was a thing, and that kind of put me off a little bit. So I kind of put it down again until university, and then I wrote the second story that meant something to me, which is the one that I did finish. And part of the reason this meant something to me, I think, is that it was my first sale. My first thing that I'd wrote that someone went, actually, yes, I'll pay you some money so I can publish that, and that made me feel like a real author. So first wrote this one. I've dug it up for some additional context. I suppose I'm a member of an online writing group, fantasy-writers.org. If you're listening, I'd recommend getting over there. It's a fantastic place, and it's how I've developed my own writing from sort of starting to where I am now, full of people who are just starting out writing, full of people who have 50 to 100 writing credits on their writing CV. And it's all about dedicating ourselves to writing, critiquing each other, and making ourselves better writers. But I've got it up on screen now. It's called On the Transmogrification of Small Mammals. And the reason I think it means so much to me, it's an epistolary tale between two different warring wizards who are trying to publish something in magical journals. And this is slightly inspired by some of the editorial notes I read in Nature magazine. And they kind of have a back and forward discussion through letters, and it kind of escalates up to the point where one of the magicians gets an arm up on a leg up on the other, and becomes successful. It's part of the reason I'm quite inspired, to be fair, by the mastermind prompt as well, because I've found that I love writing that trope of the mastermind who isn't quite as clever as they think they are.
They never are they? No.
No.
Just before you move on from that, because I really really like listening or reading or watching academics getting catty with each other about like a complete, like a really eccentric small little point about something. What's your best? Sorry, go on, Nico.
Just say that there's nothing more snipey than the phrase. Well, I suppose that is one interpretation of it. In the middle of it's going down.
That's the equivalent of drawing a claymore from a dolphin sheath in academic circles.
That's not a sword sheath, by the way, not a condom for dolphins for any e-read listeners.
That's what I call my dick. Anyway, that was.
So, Gareth, what were you planning on doing tonight? Oh well.
Oh Christ. Okay, so my actual question there, before we got a little bit derailed by dolphin sheaths, was do you have a particular like a favorite moment of those editorial notes where people were sniping back and forth to each other in Nature?
I mean, the problem with this question is I do. I also work in the industry, so I can't.
Oh shit!
I know these people.
That's fair. That's fair. That's absolutely fair.
I'll leave that up. I don't know if the crossover of the people who listen to this are the same people, but I'll just err on the side of caution.
Absolutely. Insert redacted noises here. So, just in terms of your work, we spoke about it a little bit in the first episode towards the end. But,
yes.
Where would you recommend that people start reading your work?
Well, it depends. So a lot of what I've published out online is behind sort of paywalls, so because it's been sold to magazines. I would probably recommend going to my own site. Well, first off, I'd recommend going to this podcast, but you're already here, so I'd recommend going to my own website where I've got a mastermind kind of themed story, a diabolical plot, which is on the homepage, which you can read and enjoy and decide whether you like or don't like my writing, whichever way you fall. Those short stories that I published, the thing I find with short stories, and I'm sure you've discovered this yourself, to be fair, through writing 200 odd of them over the course of your podcast, is that you can explore a lot more with different styles and different voices.
Yes.
So a lot of my short stories are more varied.
Would you say that you're more of a short story writer than a novelist? Then I mean, I think Ben and I currently are quite safely in that camp. Although Ben has an excellent novel that he's currently pushing, and I have a mediocre one that I'm punching up. But I think we've definitely earned our short story boots. Where do you
definitely? So I would say there's no reason you can't beat both, right? I mean, you've recently had Adrian Tchaikovsky on, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think he's just gone out. His work is incredible in whatever medium he writes. And he goes to demonstrate that you can do whatever you want, define yourself however you want to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to name check that again a bit. Like that was a really scary experience for me in the best way. It was like an actual definition of awe, in the sense that it should be a little bit scary to see the face of God.
So I know exactly what you mean, because I had that experience at FantasyCon. I've got quite the interaction that you have there with authors is you get to know people a little bit. So I've spoke with a lot of people that I've read their books of, and I sit there and I find out they're just human. And I just got this awe off Adrian Tchaikovsky where it just like starstruck every time. And I tried to speak to him, but I couldn't bring myself to quite do it.
It definitely was a bit biblically accurate short story writer when he was on. Like Ben and I we spoke about it afterwards, as of course we would. but it was like watching a world class sushi chef take apart a tuna in front of me. Man, I really know fuck all about fish. I need to get my head down and learn some stuff about this.
Two home cooks watching that happen. You know what I mean? Like it was. It was really, really good.
Yeah, a possible tuna casserole, but fuck.
I've opened a can or two in my time.
Yeah. So I suppose from my perspective, like what I found is basically I took on. You've probably heard a varying degree of common writing advice. One of the pieces of writing advice that I took on quite early was the write every day. Yeah. And what's that's kind of led me to is I started with the short stories, and I learned my craft through short stories, and I think that's an important thing to do in a way. It's important, I think, in terms of development to finish things and to practice going back through them and editing them, making them better. A lot of people will go and start with a novel and they will get halfway through it and give up because it is a long effort. It's a massive effort to write a novel. Yeah. You start with a short story, you finish a bit quicker, you get that practice of finishing, you get the idea of how the tempo of the story moves, and then you kind of move up onto novels. So I did that while writing every day. And what I found now is I've got a massive backlog of all kinds of short stories and all kinds of novels that are kind of I've written them every day. I have not edited them every day.
Yeah.
So I've got more novels probably than short stories now. So maybe novelist, I think.
I like that. I like that answer a lot.
I think you get to wear one of each boot. You've earned it.
Maybe
one of them's really small though, and.
Yeah, what if there's like a really small cape that people can wear to mark themselves as short story writers, and then the novelists are the boots. They'll clomp you up and down.
So everyone's dressed like Puss in Boots there.
Yes,
just a cape boots. And where do you get the hat? Is that for poetry?
Yeah, probably for poetry. And the sword is like sonnets or something. It's yeah. Yes, you did recently force me to watch Puss in Boots 2. And yes, it was the best animated movie I've ever seen.
I'm just picturing that scene from A Clockwork Orange now. When you say "force me to watch this thing," just A Clockwork Orange.
It's actually not far off, actually.
To Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, I absolutely did. So,
anyway,
say hypothetically, two writers are being held hostage by a powerful and capricious bibliomancer, and he is hell bent on getting the best published works he can for his magical library. What novel would you recommend to that wizard just to get Ben and I a bit of breathing room? Hypothetical.
I mean, is it worth risking the novel of travel to the dimension of eternal torment? Is that a trick he'll fall for, or is that a free for all time?
House was that done by?
So I imagine, yes, this bibliomancer. You say you've done quite a few episodes at this point. He's probably got a lot of Joe Abercrombie. I'd imagine he's got a lot of Adrian Tchaikovsky, as we've mentioned. Probably got a lot of Ursula Le Guin, that kind of thing. So I don't want to recommend him anything he's already got on the shelf. Yeah. I do wonder if he's got a Daniel Keyes novel on there.
Ooh, which one would you recommend?
So one of my possibly the most emotional impacting novel on me is probably Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes.
Right. So I've heard of this story before because they made it into a movie, didn't they? And
possibly. I know they made it into an It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode.
Right. Yes, that's where I know it from. So I'm feeling particularly uncultured at this point because I have not read this. And all my knowledge of it comes from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which
the placebo effect.
The placebo effect. Yeah.
No, it is.
Talks to cats.
So yeah, it's a absolutely fantastic novel about a mentally challenged man who is selected for a treatment to increase his intelligence, and it's told in a diary style. It was a short story prior to it being a novel. I've heard the argument that the short story is actually better. I've not read the short story to confirm that. The novel in itself is a masterpiece, and just the emotional impact of that. It's one of those novels that, if I'm in the right mood, I will select it and read it again and again. If I want that emotional hit, it's fantastic.
So what about the emotional hit? Do you think if you were to break that down a bit for us, like what's what about it keeps you coming back? Because obviously, to pick up the same novel a few times, it there must be something particular to that book that's getting you. What's it itches it's scratching for you?
It's hard to say without kind of giving a few spoilers for the book, which I'm
okay with
not
spoilers.
wanting
I think
to do.
if we just sort of say there are spoilers ahead and people can skip a few minutes ahead if they want to, but I'm interested to hear what you say.
So the emotional impact for me really comes in the latter half of the novel. So again, spoiler alert, you've just said yourself you haven't read it, but spoiler alert, towards the end, he kind of takes the treatment, and we find that his intelligence increases, and you see that increase because it's told in this diary style. You see that increase in the way he's writing at the start. You see that progression of his writing from kind of childish and misspellings to really become that fully fledged prose that is almost as good as Ben's. And then there is a point in the book where that changes. Pause for potential people to skip forward again. And you see that the treatment starts to fail, and it's this inevitability, I think, that gets me every time. Yeah. In that where this is going, and it's just the tragedy that you see coming is because you see it coming, because it's drawn out slightly. I think it's really more impacting. I do think that the diary style of it really draws you in as well, in terms of emotionality.
Really good breakdown.
That would be my one.
I particularly enjoyed the extremely flattering compliment you paid me during it as well. But no, totally get it. Totally get it.
It does sound like it's got some distance also from Charlie not being able to get the cheese out of the maze.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, I do love I thought they were going to call it. So the Flowers for Algernon name, again, my spoilers for the book, it comes from a mouse that has the same treatment as the protagonist in the novel. And his name is Algernon.
Right.
And I did appreciate that if you've not seen Always Sunny in Philadelphia and you like laughing at people who are just horrible people and enjoying the fact they're much worse than you, I'd recommend going to watch it. But in the show, they call the mouse Armitage Shanks. I distinctly remember as a toilet brand in the UK.
Yeah.
Absolutely tickled me.
Yeah. Oh man. God, I think I might have to go and read this because I love this the dramatic tension of the rise in intelligence and then the inevitable fall of intelligence. Sounds awful. Am I right in thinking that it reduces back to the sort of misspellings and thoughts? That sounds like it's rough. That sounds really good.
It is, but it's not the same rough as like Requiem for a Dream. It's an enjoyable one you want to see it have again.
Amazing. So, with all this in mind, in terms of the structure of things, what is your editing process when you've finished either a short story or a novel, whichever one you want to speak about, if they're different, of course. You finish your first draft. What do you then do to it to get it to where you want it?
So, good point to give another shout out to my writers group, fantasy-writers.org. You should get on there. The people on there are lovely, really tight knit group, and have grown me as an author from my original kind of waffling for 2 pages about nothing in particular to actually having a plot. But my writing process would generally be an idea sparks. So some of these ideas are from the writing group. They have a monthly writing challenge in terms of short stories that will give you a writing prompt. Or, one option could be to write along with Ben and Nico when they do writing prompts each week. You've got a lot of material there to cover to generate a first draft. Then I would typically post that on the writing group page. It's password protected, so it doesn't count as published. There is some people who fear that once they put something out on the internet, it counts as published and they won't be able to sell it, but that does not apply if it's behind a password protected wall. So that first draft will get feedback from what I'd call alpha feedback from other critiques on the site, and that will then be factored into kind of a developmental edit. Are there plot beats, anything breaking that makes the story not work? I'll get a lot of feedback on that and integrate it into a second draft. Dependent on whether it's a short story or whether it's a novel, it'll kind of take different routes. Then the short story I'll kind of read back myself, do a copy edit on it, and get it sent out and circulated for submission. A novel, I will do the same thing, but then send it out to beta readers. So I've distinguished this as sort of my alpha readers are kind of writers who will provide technical feedback on the work. They're people who can see the tree, the wood for the trees, as it were. Like, and then I will see the actual ingrained structure, even in what's the better phrase is probably the diamond in the rough. And then I will send it to beta readers, who are people who are readers. They might not be. They might be people who are just my friends who don't really read the genre, to read it for and rate their enjoyment of it. Is there anything that hung them up? Is there anything that stopped them reading? They might be people who are fantasy, sci-fi enthusiasts who probably provide a bit more genre-specific feedback. After that, it will come back for another round of edits based on the beta readers. And then I'll probably do another round of edits on my own kind of bugs that I've caught in there, or the ways that the feedback has been delivered. That there's a thing with feedback where you kind of, it's always described for writers that the best way to deliver feedback is to describe the symptoms and not diagnose the problem.
Yeah,
as it were. You've got to let the writer themselves diagnose what's wrong with it. So I could say, oh, this doesn't work, rather than you need to do this, because you might not need to do that. You might be wrong. So I will interpret the beta reader's feedback, incorporate that into another draft, and then what I will do is perform a fun backwards read of my novel to catch any errors. One of the things you find is when you're reading in the narrative, sometimes you do get lost in the narrative and you see what you expect to see, and that can lead to quite a few errors in your book. So you want to, well, you don't want to read it backwards to try and flag a lot of those errors and make it as clean as possible. And then, dependent on that, I might send it out on submission, or I might look into putting it up online.
So that sounds like an incredibly well-honed and practiced process. How long has it taken you to get to knowing it that well? Like, there must have been some things that have been speed bumps that you've gone, there's no use for that. So what have you binned? What tools are no good and people should consider maybe not worrying about?
I don't know. One thing I have found is kind of there's a common kind of editing software and things like that that some people swear by. I find that it is quite hit or miss. So, for example, I use a Pro Writing Aid, which is a software that it's an editing software, and things like Grammarly, and they can sometimes remove, in my opinion at least, personality from writing. Like, sometimes you are grammatically incorrect, but the voice fits the narrative style you're using, or the grammar inconsistency fits maybe a character's point of view that you're in. So I've found that can be restrictive. It's using the tool for the purpose that you want to use it for, rather than for the job that it wants to do in some instances.
I know 100% what you're saying. It can be kind of sanitizing, right? It doesn't.
Yes.
Things that are a bit odd.
Yes. That's exactly nail on the head, I think.
So you've got it down. You're writing every day. But who inspired you to start telling your own story?
Oh, I can tell you that exactly, because I have a fun story about it. So my two favorite authors. Well, my favorite author growing up, Garth Nix. I don't know if you've read.
Oh yeah, Garth Nix, the
Old Kingdom trilogy.
The
Old Kingdom
trilogy.
Yeah, lots more now. So Garth Nix was an absolute. So I started as a teenager, and I'd read Harry Potter, and that was it. And my mum started trying to branch out at Christmas by buying me different books. And I think I picked up Darren Shan, who's a good children's author, and I think I picked up Philip Pullman and his Dark Materials. That was kind of a little bit of my head. Garth Nix, though, picking it up as a teenager, that was the one that really gripped me and pulled me into.
Was it Sabriel that got you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, which is maybe a bit of an exception, considering teenagers often, at least I've been told, I didn't do this myself, obviously, read their own kind of gender.
Yes.
I've read that it's hard for a female protagonist to pick up a male teenage reader. But for some reason, Sable absolutely grabbed me. And then as I kind of grew up more, I picked up my sister bought me actually Joe Abercrombie.
Oh, that's a big thank you to your sister there.
Yeah. Well, strangely, it was the Half a King, which is the young adult series. I don't think she knew that at the time.
Yeah.
So I read it. It's a different feel to his First Law series. It's a slightly different style, the same feel. So both of these guys are my heroes, and I actually attended when I'd started to, or decided that I wanted to start writing more thoroughly. I attended an event called Gollancz Fest. It's put on by the Gollancz, the publishing house, and they try and put potential future authors in with the established authors. So you pay a ticket. We went down there, and there's a lot of authors. You get to meet them. You get to talk to them about the craft. Fantastic event. I remember arriving in London, so I'm obviously based quite up north. Long day of travel. Go up to the bar, get up, and I find I get a cup of tea in before the event starts. And I'm thinking, okay, this is good. I'm here. It's quite a small venue, and I turn around, and standing right behind me are both Joe Abercrombie and Garth Nix.
Oh wow!
And I've met a few different people through my. That's probably the first time I've been starstruck. So it was quite a moment. I think I went up to Garth Nix after to get my books signed, and I went up to him, thanked him for kind of inspiring me, and actually didn't put down my books and turned around to leave with my books until Garth Nix reminded, "Hey, did you want me to sign those?" I've kind of walk of shame back to the table. But yeah, those would be my two biggest inspirations, I think.
I really like that story. I think that's a really delightful way because it is, it's the same thing as meeting like a movie star or something, except they've been living rent free inside your head for how many times you've read their work. I think
just carry on.
No, it's just they're both personal heroes of mine as well. So that I really felt that when you said that you turned around and you saw them, that would have been a big deal for me as well.
It doesn't help that they're both quite tall guys as well, so it adds to the intimidation factor that they're a couple of inches over my head.
Yeah. There is something I think, I don't know whether I've said it before on this podcast, and I'm potentially being a bit unfair here, but like there was a period where a lot of people that wrote adult fantasy were sort of being, my understanding is that they were being told that they needed to write YA in order to make money, basically. And obviously it's still time commitment, it's still their work and all the rest of it. But I bounced the fuck off that Half a King series.
Oh, really?
Because I had already read the First Law trilogy, and he had immediately become one of my favorite authors of all time. And then I read that, so it was like taking a step down, sort of thing. And I was like, "What are you? Why have you wasted a year doing this?" And that's unfair because obviously he's written a book and it is supposed to communicate with a younger audience, which I wasn't at that point. But I do wonder whether we could have got another like First Law book out of him or something in that time. And personally, I would have appreciated that more. But yeah, I get it.
I mean, I have just read some news today that he is planning on returning to the First Law. If that
is he really?
Yeah, I saw that. I think it was on Reddit. I saw that today. To be fair, after the Devils, I think the that's what we're looking forward to this year, right?
I am very much looking forward to the Devils. That is going to be. Yeah. I'm going to crush that inside the first day that I get it, I think. So just on both Garth Nix and Joe Abercrombie, they both really build out their worlds, and there are religions in the Sabriel and Lyriel books, and there are definitely religions in the First Law trilogy with Joe Abercrombie, with the with the Eaters and Kamul and people like that.
Yeah.
What place does religion have in fantasy storytelling for you?
Ooh, that is a deep question. I mean, for me, it's slightly, I think, easier in comedy writing, maybe, to avoid some of the more serious things. I mean, I know you've got Terry Pratchett who specifically focuses on them, but you can get away a little bit with less world building. I have not tackled religion in a very serious way. I do have one in my list where it is kind of there is a religion, is more of just a Greek mythology. But yeah, it's for me, it's a very tough one. I know I attended a talk on this and religion's place in society and all of the other societies and how you really flesh out a world at FantasyCon where we met. And the idea is that when you're doing any ingrained work, there should be a religious element there. Like religion's a massive impacting factor on our world. And yeah, it's a very hard question to answer, to be honest, because it has in my personal opinion, it has a very strong place in the world. If you're doing a very serious piece, you'd have to ingrain that in the way your society is built, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is a personal question because it's not what place does it have for everybody else. It's what place does it have for you. So if you feel like it needs to be in that place, I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to go about answering.
Yeah, I think if the more serious works that I've done have had a more impactful religious element, because I do believe that any serious society should have a religion or some form of thought about what comes after and how did we get here, right?
Yeah, I think so. In your comedy writing, I think I have found anyway, gods make quite good comedic foils.
Yeah.
Because they already know everything. They are dramatic irony wandering around. Do you think it's easier to write a religious system where the gods are people that can just turn up and they can do the gags, or one where it's like the religions we have here where they don't tend to pop in to do the punchlines?
Yeah, again, it's a very tone-based thing of what you're trying to write, isn't it? I mean, like you've hit the nail on the head there with do you treat gods as people in the one of the current drafts I'm working on. The book is about the god of death dies, and they have a competition to find out who's going to replace him. So that becomes the gods part of that becomes a comedic element. And it ties in with the previous episode, I suppose, in what I wrote there, in that I've tried to tie in a few office comedy based elements to that. Yeah. The gods turn up; they're not treated so seriously by the tone of the novel. If you're writing something more serious, you have to treat that subject with a little bit more respect, in my opinion. You have to kind of account for the fact that there's a lot of people who are very religious in society, and any society will have a lot of people in it who are religious, whether a real society or a fabricated one. So you need to account for that in a more serious novel, I think. I wouldn't want to write a more serious novel without at least some aspect of religion to it.
Yeah. So when you are picking up novels for yourself, so it sounds like you read a lot, you write a lot, but are there any themes that you really go for, like things that call to you?
I wouldn't say there's any theme in particular that does that, no. I like to read widely. I like to read voraciously as well. So I've got, books ranging from Joe Abercrombie to kind of Travis Boltrey, Legends and Lattes on my shelf, and I've enjoyed all of them equally. I've just read TJ Klune as my first read of the year. It's House in the Cerulean Sea. There's nothing particularly thematically that appeals to me more or less. I think I enjoy them all equally. Yeah. I find myself drawn to a particular theme in a particular moment of my life, if that makes sense.
Oh,
there's more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like you go through like ebbs and flows with particular themes.
Yeah.
I
like pick up more positively themed ones when I'm feeling a little bit blue. Like, you get the cozy reads, and you get the ones to return to, which is why I think Pratchett's so rereadable. In that he's got a nice cozy vibe that also has a very nice plot.
Yeah, there is something about matching your moods, matching what you're sort of consuming, what you're imbibing with your mood, isn't there? Like, I know.
Yes.
Obviously, the same thing with people do the same thing with music quite a lot, don't they?
Yeah. I think reading a thriller-paced novel when I'm in a stressful situation in the what I do outside of writing is not gonna help me relax on that.
So you're almost like balancing what's happening in your life against what you're reading.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there's also I think the term people refer to. Sorry if I can get my words out, as like a palate cleanser novel.
Oh yeah.
You read like a Joe Abercrombie and it's a great novel. It's a great character, but it's sometimes a little. The endings on that can be just. You know what? I need a big hug and a cup of tea now, which is where you turn to TJ Klune.
Pleasant human contact. Well, speaking of pleasant human contact, do you feel personally like you're connected to a particular culture? And if so, has it shaped your writing at all? Potentially beyond the sort of fantasy writing community, like is there any other culture that you feel like is part of your identity and that's affected your writing? Subculture, indeed.
I don't think there's any particular culture that I would associate with. I feel like the culture as a scientist comes across quite often in my writing. I'll lean towards new technologies, or I'll lean towards new learnings in my work.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any particular culture. No, to be honest, there's cultures that I enjoy. I find at the moment I think we spoke a little while ago my National Novel Writing Month project, where it's kind of I based on a holiday out in Canada, and I really enjoyed the native culture out there, and I'm trying to do something that hopefully portrays that and celebrates that a little bit. But it's more, I suppose. I
think that sounds nice. This is a long shot, right? But you mentioned that your first story that meant something to you was written on a holiday as well. Is there something about going on holiday for you that's sort of like freeing and like gets the creative juices going? Like with you like leaving England and going somewhere else, and that gets your brain being like, oh, this is really fizzing with the story. Have you noticed? Is that a trend, or am I plucking? Am I plucking here?
I don't think you're quite plucking. I do think there's a time element that's involved.
True. Yeah.
It's Well, one of the things I've found, one of my hobbies is distance running, and I found some parallels between that and writing in making sure you build slowly so you don't injure yourself, and make sure you take appropriate rest. And it's, I suppose, in those rest times, those holiday times, I have more intellectual capacity available. Like my brain is not processing so much to do with work or my normal job. So I do find maybe the creative juices flow a little bit better. You mention it. I do recall writing the first draft of Going Forth on a beach in Portugal on a pad of A4 paper, because the moment struck. So you might be onto something that I'm not even aware of myself here, Ben.
It sounds like you should go on holiday more often.
Yeah. I mean, you can send that in writing to my manager. That'd be beautiful.
The doctor prescribes it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to ask, because it's happened to me just on your walk home or whatever. Have you been on one of your long runs? And you do long runs. And quite early in had a good story idea and had to like really hold it so you didn't lose it over that massive distance.
Yes, absolutely.
What's your method? Is it repeating the idea? He's got the legs of a spider but the heart of a true champion. Or do you do something? What's your method?
Honestly, it's happened a few times, and it's been on the. So I run with a Strava app, and Strava will give you updates on your progress every whatever you set it to. So every time that update came in, remind yourself of the idea exactly as you've described. Yeah, I've had it before as well. I don't know about yourselves. You wake up, I dream an idea, and I'm like, that's a fantastic idea. I need to now wake up, get out of bed and write that idea down, because it's 3 a.m. I've woken up from this fantastical dream that would make a brilliant story. And if I don't write it down now, I'm going to forget it.
Do you know the that has fucked me up multiple times is being in a really boring meeting,
Mm.
and I'm looking at them giving a presentation, and they're talking about, whatever networking thing we're gonna do or what system we're gonna bring in, and they sort of fade into like fuzzy grey spots, and my brain starts giving me plot ideas, and they get to the end and they go, "So that'll be fine, yeah?" And I go, "Yep." And then someone starts talking to me about that project, and I have to throw away the story idea.
Oh
Otherwise,
no!
I'm gonna fuck up the IT thing. But often, I just elected to fuck up the IT thing before, so I could write down the idea.
I mean,
Definitely don't
I'd be
put
like,
this
"I'll just
capitalist
do it
hellscape
later."
ahead of it. Yeah, definitely don't put
I,
the capitalist hellscape ahead of your writing.
I know I'm not associated with your company, but that was absolutely the right decision.
Yeah.
Like, not even close. Yep.
However, if you were like a heart surgeon or something, I'd potentially say let's
Maybe
revisit your priorities a little bit. Yeah.
park that. Yeah.
Doctor, we're losing her. Yeah, but what if he had the legs of a spider and the heart of a champion? I'm gonna write this now. I don't know
You're gonna
when,
have
but
to.
it's gonna happen.
At this point, you're gonna have to.
I mean, what's the next episode's theme, right? Maybe you can work something in there. It's
Like, yeah, spider legs. There you go. Prompts.
You can choose from the following prompts. Next guest: spider, legs of spider, heart of champion. Which one would you like?
Something tells me that you have a story idea in mind.
I don't know what you mean. Which one are you picking?
That's potentially quite an interesting question that I don't think we've asked anyone before, actually. But how did you pick out? Because we behind the scenes we send people 3 prompts.
Yes.
And the guest gets to pick from those 3. So
yes.
How did you pick Mastermind? Like, what was it like? What was the actual? Not necessarily like what were the other prompts, but I mean, like, what was your process for picking Mastermind?
It really jumped out at me immediately. I think I mentioned earlier, like something in me keeps coming back to the theme that someone is not as smart as they think they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that as like a comedic beat at the end. I've written a few stories where someone's tried to plan something and found out that their plan is not as good as the plan that they could have come up with if they'd just listened to someone else.
Yeah.
So I think in this instance, Mastermind jumped out partly because I know that when we first spoke about it as well, I was busy with National Novel Writing Month. I was like, oh yeah, I've got a story in my back pocket there somewhere that I can dig out on that theme. I wanted to explore some more themes, and Mastermind really does jump out at me as something that I keep coming back to in my writing, which is really interesting that it came up in the suggestions for me as well, because that worked out really well.
It's entirely random as well. So I think that's really cool that it just lit up a bit of your brain. You're like, hang on a sec, this is my wheelhouse. Let's go.
Absolutely as well. I don't even remember what the other options were.
Yeah.
They were Mindermast and legs of a spider.
That's where someone walks back from the chair.
I think you'll find that the third one was just weird sex chair for Nico to write.
I slip it in every time, but no one's picked it yet. So now that, other than obviously the tales of Dr. Crabimple with the legs of a spider and the heart of a champion, what is your next project?
Oh, so I've got a few projects going on right now. One of which again harks back to my writers group. So currently going through the editing on a short story. We are currently the writers group. I suppose plug it again, fantasy-writers.org. Brilliant if you want to start writing. Brilliant if you're a journeyman writer. Come on board. Critique other people's work. Critique your own and learn something. We're releasing a short story anthology on
Cool.
the Hero's Quest. So the Hero's Journey, I should say. The title of the anthology is Hero's Quest. So we have taken like a prompt of one of the stages of the Hero's Quest. The Hero's Journey again. I'm getting my words mixed up. So we've each taken a stage of the Hero's Journey and written a story based on the prompt of that. So you've got kind of the return for Elixir. Someone's writing a story on that. My story is based on meeting the mentor. So I've been in the editing process of that. That's looking to come out in, I think, Q1 or Q2 this year.
That's very exciting. Drew the long straw there as well, because that's always a really good bit of the classic Hero's Journey.
Yeah.
The meeting the mentor bit is always like like chef's kiss.
I mean,
That's
yeah. I'm not going to lie. I'm a glutton for punishment. So what I wanted to do was be a bit ambitious and write every stage of the hero's journey in a short story, but also feature one twice. So there is kind of a circular narrative to it. I do hopefully put in a disambiguation of it at the end of the story, so people can read through and kind of see where I hit those beats of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
But it is, it was fantastic fun to write it. Again, a bit more of a comedy piece than a serious piece. But that features kind of writers who are starting out on their journey as well. It features writers who have sort of dozens of credits, so you can see the progression that people can have in their writing. You can see the potential that you can have even if you're just starting out as well, because some of those stories from those early writers are still pretty good. And it's all that should be coming out this year. In terms of my own work, I'm currently beta reading 3 different novels. One novel is a kind of a political fantasy one. One novel is kind of a fae fantasy one, and one is a comedic fantasy about goblins. So I've got that going in the background. I've got editing on my own sci-fi comedy. Next one for me, adventure comedy that I would pitch as if you've read, I don't know if you'll have read Django Wexler's How to Become a Dark Lord and Die Trying.
Ooh, no, not.
No, okay, it's kind of that meets Red Dwarf, or maybe like Tank Girl in Red Dwarf, or Tomb Raider in Red Dwarf. Basically a bit of a kick-ass female character in an episode of Red Dwarf. And then like I say, the earlier mentioned Godhood, which is currently in the editing process as well. So a lot of irons in the fire.
Lovely.
Like to keep myself busy.
And so I think people are aware that it's going forth. They should go and buy.
Yes, should be mentioned. Going forth with a U in there, the number forth, because I've had some people complain that they've spelt it in the American way, like going out the door.
Yeah, they need to remember that it is a fourth wall story.
Yes, it's a
which
big
will help
pun.
them. Yeah, it's a
yes,
pun.
It was released. I mean, that's part of the reason it was released last year, is because last year the date came up of 04/04/2024, and I thought, well, that's the perfect release date for a book called Going Forth. I need to hit that.
Solid. So, if people want to follow you and await news of these various projects and read your stuff as it comes out, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, so I'm active on Facebook and Instagram, as active as I get on any social media. I have my own website at gjdunn.co.uk. The Instagram handle is ridicufiction, so that's a cross of ridiculous and fiction, which quite accurately describes my work. Those are probably the best ways to find me. Follow me on Amazon and on Goodreads to see me add more publications to my library. And I suppose in the streets, if you see me, bald guy, beard, follow me. Fair enough.
The description certainly narrows it down.
Well, it's been absolutely lovely having you on. I've really enjoyed talking to you about storytelling and hearing your thoughts to our various silly questions.
It's been great to catch up.
And also the stories in the previous episode, like really good. I truly enjoyed your story. It made me laugh a lot. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Much like
enjoyed being here.
Excellent, funny company, and very entertaining and educational. This is a man for everyone. Everyone must know this. That I heard give a talk on the Muppets. So he's definitely a wise fellow.
That was a lot of lifelong research went into that panel. Yeah. No, it's been great to be here. Honestly, I love the show. I love the concept. If anyone's listening and thinking about writing, get on Nico and Ben's prompts. Get yourself going. It's a brilliant concept. And get out and read Going Forth if you like. If you don't like, read something else. A lot of good books out there.
I don't think we've ever had a better way to close an episode. Thank you.
No, shut the door.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The tiny bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne, and for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?